A teenager is just ruthlessly dismantling the established order at Mercedes right now.
Mm.
And a newly weaponized Red Bull has basically risen from the grave to completely terrorize the grid.
Oh, it's a total street brawl out there.
It really is. And, you know, behind closed doors, there's this unprecedented, vicious Cold War erupting right now between Milton Keynes and Woking over the mastermind who whispers in Max Verstappen's ear. You step into this 2026 Formula One season, and suddenly any expectation of a clean, orderly championship is just gone. We are looking at a paddock where the front door hasn't just been kicked in. I mean, the entire vault has been blown wide open.
Yeah, exactly. What we are watching is the raw, unfiltered reality of these new 2026 regulations finally taking their toll. You know, the honeymoon phase of the new rules, that's dead and buried.
Completely gone.
Right. We're dealing with brutal internal team dynamics now, cars that are fundamentally fighting against the laws of physics, and honestly, a level of technical espionage that is just tearing the paddock apart in real time.
Which is exactly why we're doing this. Welcome to this deep dive. Our mission today is to decode the explosive power shifts and the boardroom bloodbaths that have just set the 2026 F1 season on fire after a really seismic Miami Grand Prix. Because to understand what's actually happening, you need to look past the broadcast. We need to dig into the raw telemetry, the paddock realities, and the engineering nightmares keeping team principals awake at night.
And there are a lot of them awake right now.
Oh, absolutely. So let's start right at the front of the grid. Because Mercedes, they thought they had this perfect succession plan. Lewis Hamilton leaves, and George Russell, who's played the good soldier, you know, waiting in the wings for years, is finally supposed to be the undisputed alpha.
That was the plan, yes.
But instead, Kimi Antonelli, who isn't even 20 years old yet, goes out and takes pole with a 1.27.798 and just wins Miami with chilling authority. I mean, he's leading the world championship by 20 points after just 4 races. Meanwhile, George Russell finishes a dismal 5th.
Yeah, 5th. It was brutal.
And Russell immediately starts blaming the smooth tarmac, right? Saying the circuit forces a conservative driving style. So, looking at the internal data, I have to ask you, what is actually happening in the telemetry here? Is Russell's excuse about the asphalt valid, or is he just missing something fundamental about how to drive this 2026 car?
Look, the asphalt is, it's a desperate excuse. When you actually look at the trace data from Miami, the difference isn't the track surface at all. It's entirely about how the two drivers are approaching mid-corner rotation.
Okay, break that down for me.
So the 2026 cars, with their specific aerodynamic profiles, they demand a distinct V-shaped driving line. You need to brake incredibly late, aggressively pivot the car at the apex, and punch out. And Antonelli is just instinctively executing this. He gets the car rotated so early.
You're just snapping it around.
Exactly. But Russell, historically, he prefers a U-shaped line, you know, carrying more minimum speed through the center of the corner in this smooth sweeping arc. But if you try to sweep a 2026 car through a corner, the new aerodynamic floor basically stalls, and you just bleed lap time. Yeah, I mean, Russell essentially spent part of his Sunday in Miami using a live Grand Prix as a test session, just to recalibrate his own muscle memory.
Wait, a live Grand Prix as a test session? I mean, that feels like it's like an understudy who waited a decade to get the lead role on Broadway, but on opening night, he's up there reading from the script while some high school kid walks off the street and steals the standing ovation?
That's exactly what it looks like.
But let me push back on this a bit, because Russell is a proven race winner. He has beaten Lewis Hamilton over a season. Are we really saying his championship window is just snapping shut 4 races into a new rule set? Isn't it a bit premature to write him off?
Well, in any normal era, yeah, it would be. But Mercedes operates on a ruthless pragmatism right now. They haven't won a title in years. Toto Wolff does not have the luxury of sentimentality or, like, patience.
He wants to win now.
Right. And Toto is already publicly stepping in to manage the media circus around Antonelli, warning him to ignore the Italian press. That is a massive signal from inside the camp. Toto is actively shielding the kid because he views Kimi as the absolute present and future of the team.
He's already crowned him internally.
Pretty much. In elite sports, nobody hands you the crown, you have to defend it.
Yeah.
And if Russell doesn't instantly reprogram his driving style to match the physics of this car, Wolff will not hesitate to officially pivot the entire engineering department's focus onto Antonelli.
And the scary thing for Mercedes is that Kimi isn't operating in a vacuum. Because while Brackley is dealing with this teenage coup, the ghosts of the old guard are waking up. The biggest threat to Antonelli's dominance is the sudden, really violent resurrection of Max Verstappen.
Oh, absolutely. Red Bull is back.
Right. Red Bull brought this massive upgrade to Miami, and our internal data suggests the silver bullet was an entirely new steering rack. Now look, I drive a standard sedan. A steering rack to me is just the thing that points the wheels. Why is it completely ripping out and replacing the steering rack such a monumental shift for a Formula One car?
You have to think of the steering rack as the absolute nervous system connecting the driver's brain to the front tires. It's everything. Imagine you are trying to thread a needle, but you are forced to wear thick, heavy winter gloves.
Okay.
You can't feel the thread, you can't feel the needle, and your movements are just clumsy. That is what Verstappen was experiencing for the first 3 races. The previous rack was just numb.
And for Max, that's a nightmare.
It's a death sentence for his lap time. For a driver like Max, who relies entirely on a hypersensitive, razor-sharp front end to aggressively rotate the car, a numb steering rack means he can't drive the car the way he wants. So Red Bull isolated this flaw, poured unlimited resources into manufacturing an entirely new assembly, and rushed it to a filming day test at Silverstone just days before Miami. They effectively took the winter gloves off.
And the result was terrifying. I mean, Max goes from missing Q3 entirely in Japan to qualifying second in Miami. But here's where I'm a bit confused looking at the weekend. Sunday was pure, unfiltered Verstappen aggression. On lap 2, he forces his way inside Carlos Sainz, damages his wing, and just coldly calls the midfield chaos on the radio.
Yeah, vintage Max.
Right. But before that, he binned it with a spin at turn 1 and dropped deep into the pack. If Red Bull fixed the car and gave him the perfect steering rack, why is he spinning out on the very first corner? Doesn't that massive error kind of mask the fact that this newly upgraded car might still be fundamentally unstable?
I get why you'd think that, but you have to look past the turn 1 anomaly. That spin was a cold tire mistake. It was just a driver pushing 110% on lap 1 trying to make a statement.
So it wasn't the car snapping on him unexpectedly?
No, not at all. The true revelation, and honestly what should terrify the rest of the grid, is what happened after the spin. Look at the stint averages in the raw telemetry. Verstappen was matching, and in the second sector completely exceeding the pace of KIMI Antonelli while running in dirty air on heavily degraded ancient tires.
Wow, on dead rubber.
Blistering pace on dead rubber. The spin doesn't prove the car is unstable. It proves that even when the car is compromised and fighting through traffic, it now possesses enough raw mechanical grip to just carve through the field. Max is officially a lethal threat in this title equation again.
Which brings us to the teams desperately trying to fight Red Bull in this technical arms race. Because Red Bull's upgrade was a hammer blow, but the rules of engagement have completely changed this year. We are seeing teams fighting against the brutal, unforgiving reality of 2026 physics. The cars are roughly 1.6 seconds slower than last year. The Miami pole dropped from a 1.26.2 to a 1.27.7.
It's a huge drop-off.
And I keep seeing this phrase in the telemetry analysis, super clipping. What exactly is breaking down here? Why are these multi-million-dollar machines suddenly hitting a wall on the straights?
To understand super clipping, you have to understand the aerodynamic straitjacket that the 2026 regulations enforce. The power units are now split roughly 50-50 between the internal combustion engine and the electrical battery deployment.
Right, way more reliance on the battery now.
Exactly. So super clipping happens when a car is blasting down a long straight, and halfway down, the electrical battery completely drains to zero. It's like an Olympic sprinter running a 100-meter dash. But 20 meters before the finish line, their lungs suddenly stop taking in oxygen. The body just shuts down.
Oh man, that sounds violent.
It is. The car's combustion engine alone cannot push through the aerodynamic drag at 200 miles per hour, so the car hits a literal wall of air, and the top speed violently plateaus.
And this is where we see the massive divergence between McLaren and Ferrari in how they handle that straitjacket. Because McLaren rolls into Miami with only half of their scheduled upgrade package, literally just 50% of what they planned, and they still secure second and third on the podium.
They were flying.
Meanwhile, Ferrari brings a massive upgrade that looks like a rocket ship on Saturday in qualifying. But on Sunday, it turns into an absolute tire-eating disaster. Leclerc completely destroyed his medium tires in the first stint. It's like McLaren is a street fighter winning the brawl with one hand tied behind their back, while Ferrari is actively punching itself in the face.
That is a perfect way to describe it.
So why is Ferrari eating its own tires while McLaren is flying on half an upgrade? Is Ferrari already dead in the water for this championship?
Ferrari is taking on water incredibly fast because they are falling victim to the 2026 yo-yo effect. Overtaking and defending this year isn't just about downforce anymore. It's about software. It's about powertrain mapping.
The brains of the car.
Right. McLaren has mastered the software comprehension of when and how to deploy that electrical energy so they don't run out of oxygen on the straights. Ferrari, however, appears to have a fundamentally weaker power unit. So to avoid that super clipping we talked about, Ferrari is running dangerously low downforce. They are trimming out the rear wing to reduce drag so the combustion engine can keep pushing the car.
But the cost of that is catastrophic in the corners, right? Because they're just sliding everywhere.
Exactly the issue. Less downforce means the car isn't being pushed into the track. So when Leclerc hits a high-speed corner, the car slides. And when the Formula One tire slides laterally across the asphalt, the surface temperature violently spikes, and the rubber blisters.
So they're literally cooking the tires to make up for a slow engine.
Ferrari is completely sacrificing their tires to mask an engine deficit. And then you add in their operational disasters like a pit stop that took over 4 seconds, and their execution is just failing on all fronts. McLaren is lethal with 50% upgrades because their software is perfectly synced with their aerodynamics.
Speaking of software, if the front of the grid is struggling to understand this, the midfield must be an absolute bloodbath right now.
Oh, it is pure survival down there.
Every tenth of a second is the difference between surviving and drowning. But we actually saw some miracles for Alpine and Williams in Miami. Franco Colapinto finally ditches his compromised crash test chassis at Alpine, gets a fresh tub, and immediately goes toe-to-toe with Lewis Hamilton.
What a drive that was.
Unbelievable. And over at Williams, Carlos Sainz finishes a staggering 8 seconds ahead of his teammate, Alex Albon. But what blows my mind is the internal reality of what Sainz is driving. That Williams is carrying an excess weight of 4 kilograms. Contextualize that for us. What does 4 extra kilos actually do to an F1 car?
Look, in a sport governed by millimeter precision, 4 kilograms of excess weight is a death sentence. It affects the car's center of gravity, its braking distance, and its tire wear. Imagine trying to run a highly competitive marathon, but you are forced to carry a bowling ball in your backpack.
A bowling ball? That's insane.
It bleeds your lap time every single time you accelerate out of a corner. Sainz is basically dragging an overweight tractor into the points through sheer, unrelenting racecraft and mitigation.
And you have to contrast that with the team. Sainz just walked away from Audi, because Audi's weekend was a catastrophic implosion. Nico Hülkenberg suffered severe engine overheating, and then the team botched a fluid leak repair so badly that it completely ruined their sprint race.
It was amateur hour.
It's like putting duct tape on a submarine hatch and hoping it holds at the bottom of the ocean. Right now, Sainz looks like a tactical genius for avoiding that project entirely. But I have to ask, is Alpine's sudden leap forward with Colapinto genuine? Or is it just a temporary illusion based on Miami's specific track layout?
No, the pace is entirely genuine. And it comes back to the exact same battleground we saw with McLaren. Software mapping. Alpine and Williams both run the Mercedes power unit. And for the first 3 races, they were completely lost in how to map the energy delivered.
They couldn't get the battery to work right.
Right. But in Miami, both teams finally unlocked a deeper understanding of how to sequence the electrical deployment to match their chassis. That software breakthrough is the only thing keeping them alive. Audi, meanwhile, is a textbook case of operational incompetence. You can have the best driver in the world, but if your garage can't fix a fluid leak without ruining a session, the 2026 regulations will swallow you whole.
So we've covered the asphalt, the telemetry, and the physics, but this brings us to the most vicious, cutthroat fight of the entire Miami Grand Prix. And it didn't even happen on the track. It happened behind closed doors in the VIP hospitality suites.
This is the real drama right here.
A full-blown Cold War has erupted between Red Bull and McLaren. The legendary race engineer GIANPIERO LAMBIASE GP, the calm, commanding voice in Verstappen's ear for all his championships, is defecting to McLaren. And Red Bull boss Laurent Mekies is just going nuclear over this.
The fallout is totally unprecedented. Mekies has drawn a massive line in the sand, publicly vowing to hold GP to every single day of his contract, effectively trapping him at Milton Keynes until 2028.
2028? That's years away.
And Mekies didn't just enforce a contract. He launched a psychological attack. He started sarcastically telling the paddock that GP was going to McLaren to be their team principal.
Which is incredibly calculated, because he's deliberately trying to sow discord inside Woking, making McLaren's current team principal, Andrea Stella, feel threatened. It forced McLaren's CEO, Zak Brown, to literally step in front of the microphones and publicly clarify that GP's being hired as a racing director, not team principal.
Yeah, Zak had to do damage control immediately.
The tension got so high that Zak Brown physically walked into the Red Bull motorhome to try and de-escalate it. But the damage is done. If you're Red Bull, how do you manage this? This is like a five-star general who is actively planning the next 4 years of a war, while his entire army knows he has already signed a contract to defect to the enemy. How on earth can Verstappen and GP maintain their telepathic, split-second trust on the radio when they both know a bitter, forced divorce is looming over every single call?
Honestly, they cannot maintain it. And that is the absolute ruthless genius of McLaren's move here. It is a masterstroke of destabilization. In modern Formula One, the bond between a driver and their race engineer relies on total, unconditional transparency.
They need to share everything.
Everything. They share biometric data, psychological states, and deeply guarded setup secrets. GP knows every intimate detail of Red Bull's 2026 development path. Having a lame duck tactician sitting on your pit wall, holding all your secrets while you battle the very team he is leaving to join, is a strategic nightmare.
It's unbelievable.
By hiring GP, McLaren has ensured that Red Bull is now fighting a war on two fronts. They have a physical war against the grid on Sunday and a toxic psychological war within their own garage every single day.
So what does this all mean as the paddock packs up and leaves Miami? You look at it, and the grid is waking up to the brutal realities of these 2026 regulations. The mechanical grip is shifting, the software is paramount, and the psychological warfare is at an absolute fever pitch. Kimi Antonelli has proven he is the real deal, leaving George Russell fighting for his career. Red Bull has found their fangs again by replacing their steering rack, while Ferrari is just eating their tires to mask a fundamentally flawed powertrain.
The defining lesson of Miami is that the margins are incredibly unforgiving now. Whether it's a driver unable to adapt their cornering line, a team mismanaging their electrical deployment, or executives playing mind games in the hospitality, the consequences of getting it wrong are immediate and severe.
Which leaves you with this chilling thought to ponder as we look ahead. Consider the terrifying rate of evolution we just witnessed in a single weekend. A simple steering rack fix suddenly handed Red Bull a massive leap in race pace, and McLaren nearly won the Grand Prix using only half of their upgrade package. What kind of absolute monsters are these cars going to be when the Canadian Grand Prix forces everyone to lay all their cards on the table? If McLaren is this fast with one hand tied behind their back, what happens when they bring the rest of their arsenal? The season hasn't just started. The real war has only just been declared. Keep your eyes on the telemetry because this street brawl is only going to get faster.